Check your calendar, because we are now 278 long days away from the midterms, and tension in Minnesota is still high, high, high. The Department of Homeland Security has confirmed that investigators are now reviewing new footage of an altercation between someone who appears to be Alex Preddy and law enforcement 11 days before his death. We have obtained the video from the news movement. We do not have any context as to what led up to the interaction.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Preddy interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him. Our footage was analyzed by the BBC, whose facial recognition technology confirmed his identity to a 97% degree of accuracy.
Please remember, this was 11 days before Preddy was shot dead by Border Patrol agents while he was peacefully protesting. There's currently no indication that the officers on Saturday recognized him from the earlier incident. We also have learned that the two agents who shot Alex Preddy have been placed on paid administrative leave. They will be out of work for 3 days on desk duty as the investigation proceeds. As backlash is continuing over the response to the shooting, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz sat down with our colleague Jacob Soboroff to talk about the arrival of Tom Homan in Minneapolis. Here's a clip.
Tom Homan called me, not something Bravino or Noam would ever do. But the fear I have with that is it we going to get more of the same, but more efficient at this oppression?
Well, he's one of the most extreme people when it comes to immigration policy in the federal government.
That's right. And I think that's the fear. I think right now, though, that Tom Homan's taken his marching orders from the president. And what I understood, and the reason that I believe there's an opportunity for something to do here, because just to be very clear, what the White House wants is for these scenes on the streets to stop, because it's tanking their approval ratings. And according to the president, it looks bad.
Meanwhile, the Star Tribune reports that the FBI has taken over the investigation into the attack on Representative Ilhan Omar during her town hall in Minneapolis yesterday, where a man lunged at the Congresswoman and sprayed her with some sort of liquid. All right, let's bring in our nightcap. Jason Johnson joins us, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University. He is also an MS Now political contributor. Daniel Coe, former White House Deputy Cabinet Secretary during the Biden administration. He is running for Congress in the state of Massachusetts. Peter Goodman joins us, global economics correspondent for the New York Times, and journalist John Avlon. He is the host of the Bulwark podcast. It's a must listen. How to Fix It with John Avlon. Okay, yesterday, President Trump suggested that he will de-escalate things in Minneapolis, and today he said that the mayor there was playing with fire. Is he serious, John, about de-escalation, or is he merely saying that yesterday because the country's fired up, but his mission and his message, well, that's not changing?
Donald Trump has never been the adult in the room in this conversation.
Well, he's old.
He's elderly, but not an adult. I mean, he's always been, tone comes from the top. What ICE has been doing in the streets are because Donald Trump has set that tone, and it filters down through Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem to Bovino and the folks on the street. If he's concerned about what's been happening in Minneapolis, it's all about me, not we. And so don't take for 1 second him sincerely trying to say he's trying to de-escalate. If he could de-escalate, he could order a stand down. He hasn't done that. In fact, they're just trying to get voting records through Pam Bondi and the coercion, and Freedom Caucus is talking about the Insurrection Act.
We're going to get to both of those things. Yeah. In that same vein, Congressman Joaquin Castro posted this image today of visiting this 5-year-old boy and his father who were detained last week by ICE. They're currently in a Texas detention facility. So Greg Bovino may have left Minnesota, but images like this are going to do nothing to make the American people feel like this mission has been dialed back in any way.
Absolutely not. And look, this president likes to talk about America first. Nothing says America first like shooting Americans in the face. Okay, he ran to stop the chaos, but he's instead sowing it. And to your point, he has this messianic complex that everyone's going to see him as a savior, and no one's buying it anymore. He's murdering protesters in the street while they're exercising their First Amendment rights. You know, he's claiming that inflation is solved on TV yesterday. Inflation is not solved. It's still at 2.7%. And he's threatening our NATO allies with ridiculousness like Greenland to try to distract from the Epstein files, right? So, you know, he tries to think of himself as a savior. He's clearly not, and his approval ratings show that America Americans aren't buying it with 37%. The jig is up, and no one sees this president as the savior that he hopes to be.
Reminder, side note, the Epstein files are now 1 month and I think 2 weeks overdue. We're still waiting. Stephen Miller, who is all in on this, he did issue a statement last night starting to say that the CBP agents may have diverted from a certain protocol before the killing of Alex Preddy. Does this show you that this administration is worried about how this is coming across to the American people?
You got the governor of Texas saying, hey, hold on now.
Greg Abbott himself.
When Greg Abbott is saying maybe you guys have gone too far, it's an indicator that they're going too far. When Stephen Miller feels compelled to say anything, it's a sign they've gone too far. Look, as everyone else said, the last time Trump de-escalated is when he came down the stairs of Trump Tower to run for president. He doesn't know how to de-escalate anything. He's not interested in that. But I do think that there are enough people, and you see it on the ground. Every single interview I've seen with business leaders and folks who didn't care about politics and people who are clearly Republicans and gun owners are saying, this is crazy. You're attacking my neighbors. And if you're hearing that in Minnesota, then you're also hearing that in Texas, and you're hearing it in North Carolina, and you're hearing it from business leaders. So that's what this administration is hearing. This is not popular with anyone, and they finally have to backtrack. Now, whether or not shifting around the leaders is going to do anything one way or another, I don't know. But I think that they realize that they have gone too far in this particular instance, and they've got to change the rhetoric, and they're probably going to have to change the policy.
But are they really backtracking? The Justice Department has already said it will not open a civil rights inquiry into Preddy's killing. And I think it's important for folks to understand, because I think we forget this. The Civil Rights Division does not just investigate discrimination in voting, education, housing. This group is specifically there, among other reasons, to investigate cases of police officers using excessive force against civilians. The exact kind of incident we're talking about here. And they've said, no, we're not going to open that investigation. Nothing to see here.
He's trying to have it multiple ways. I mean, this is a president whose brand is extremism. I mean, this is classic populism, right? I'm not going to be defeated or impeded by decorum, precedent, the law. I'm going to give you, the people, what you want. And certainly his base has really been delighted by his extreme crackdown on immigration. However, we are now rubbing up against other issues that are very significant to his base, such as gun rights. I mean, the idea that we're going to justify what looks to most people who've seen the video like a brazen killing of a guy, and justifying that based on the fact that he happened to have a handgun he was legally permitted to carry in that state, that's not going to play well with certain parts of his base. The same can be said about states' rights. I mean, this is not a country, especially the further west you get, where large numbers of people are delighted by the prospect of the feds coming in, guns blazing, and taking over. So he's cognizant of that, clearly. And, you know, is this really de-escalation? I'm with you guys. De-escalation is not a big part of the Donald Trump playbook, but it's certainly an attempt to at least distance him from some of the immediate consequences of this thing going badly awry.
Or, John, is this where Donald Trump ultimately was always going to take us to, right? He started on the escalator in Trump Tower with Mexicans, rapists, and drug dealers. There have been, I'm not going to say countless, but many, many opportunities for comprehensive immigration reform in this century, and it hasn't happened. In the last 2 years, the Senate put forth a comprehensive deal, and it was Trump who said to Republicans, don't you touch that. So should we not be surprised that under Donald Trump's leadership and knowing who he is, of course we would end up here targeting people who look and sound different?
Of course. This was the slogan and the signs at the convention saying mass deportations now. This is exactly what was going to happen. When people said that your troops are going to be used against American citizens in the streets, this was what was warned about. In fact, this was what was promised. And that's one of the reasons why we got to really make sure that we stop this reckoning right now. And if Congress wants to play a constructive role, don't just, freeze the ICE funding. Pass comprehensive immigration reform. Build a wall with a big gate. Let's get this system fixed.
Which citizens, business leaders, Americans across the board have been asking for.
But what Trump is doing is not creating divisions between citizens and non-citizens. He's creating divisions between people who look like him and people who don't look like him. Remember his Thanksgiving Day tweet where he talked about 53 million foreign people in this country being mostly gang leaders and mostly drug cartels. That census number he cited, 25 million of that 53 million are American citizens. Right? He celebrated on CNBC when the jobs numbers came out that fewer foreign-born workers had jobs. He said that was a good thing. This is a very protracted strategy. What he talked about Somalians in general, Somali Americans, saying that they were all garbage. It is not a coincidence that Ilhan Omar is facing this kind of discrimination, because that is exactly what Donald Trump is doing, dividing us on racial lines, on gender lines, on what you believe in. That is his vision, to sow that chaos.
He's always been this guy. Like, none of this is surprising to me. Everyone's paying attention, has seen it. But what I think the difference is, and why I think we're seeing, again, what I think is at least some semblance of verbal escalation, is because for once it is crystallized into a policy that people are unhappy with. And this is not bad.
Americans.
You finally piss people off. Because here's the thing. Philando Castile, he had a right to have his gun too. People didn't respond this way. Right? I just wrote an op-ed for MS Now. 46%, this is YouGov back in November, 46% of Americans say they want to abolish ICE. Not reform it, not change it around, abolish it. That is an extreme, and that was before these shootings. Okay? ICE is less popular than the IRS, and the IRS has a 125-year head start. Okay? So when you get to a point where the American people are saying, I don't just feel bad about this. I'm not just upset about the images, but there is a policy issue. There is a policy division that I want change because of this. That is why they're actually backing up. And I don't think it's gonna end this, but I think it is why we're hearing people like Stephen Miller talk differently.
Then try to make sense of this. The House Freedom Caucus, you mentioned it not long after the killing, posted, if Democrat-run sanctuary cities continue enabling communist agitators assaulting ICE and federal law enforcement, then it is time to invoke the Insurrection Act to maintain law and order.
That's the headline, right? I mean, the fact that the Freedom Caucus is saying the president should invoke the Insurrection Act, what they have consistently threatened to do. This is the Stephen Miller fantasy baseball.
Have they looked who the people are who are protesting?
Right.
Or
right.
people getting shot.
They noticed.
By the way, look a lot like Donald Trump in terms of your.
Well, this is a law-abiding American citizen with no criminal record, and the constitutional rights are being violated. But the Insurrection Act is a real threat. Right? I mean, put aside the angry absurdity of calling protesters communists. I got not a lot of time for communists. There's a real death toll behind them. You're talking about Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot. This is not people who are protesting the streets of Minneapolis. But then the Insurrection Act is a real deal threat to American democracy. And the fact that members of Congress are floating that, encouraging the president to invoke it, that is something to be wide awake in America about.